out incessantly for more than a week. Route number 2, flatbed trucks head for Staten Island dump site, decked with debris for careful scrutiny. DNA the thread throughout this horror story, the means to identify for closure and dignity. Route number 1, police motorcycles escort ambulances carrying remains to East 30th Street, facilities set up to receive way too often what were just shards of humanity. Visible gaps, intangible voids, eerie quiet over New York skies, no air traffic of any kind. Extrapolate that across the rest of the country. Scary how quickly world markets decline. Brooklyn's Washington Avenue slopes down from Eastern Parkway. How large those towers loomed. Looked to be just down the street, almost close enough to touch, as if there was no river in between. The new site, however, is spectacular at night. Thank you. Thank you. This is a rather long title with subtitle. It's called Brief Nod to My Own Mastodon Sweet Tooth. Subtitle, Who Says You Can't Have Dessert Before Dinner? Fanny Farmer boxed candy, your maple tang remembered, Cushman's chocolate layer cake, iced in concentric ridges, indescribable taste. Best I can do is the word sweetlicious. Seal test, fresh scooped half pint, vanilla fudge, my favorite. Little brown paper bags stuffed with penny candy, squirrel nuts, bazooka gum, jawbreakers, stuff that colored your tongue, and more. Just about defunct, the old neighborhood candy store. Some prime Italian restaurants have timed out. Orchidia, 2nd Avenue and 9th. Orchidia spelled L-A-S-A-G-N-A. L-A-S-A-G-N-A. Best I've had in life. Emilio's, 6th Avenue above Bleecker. Garden tables in back. Nobody rushed you. Bartender did this funny action. His thumb met mine each time I paid. Things I remember. West 3rd off 6th. 2nd floor, Trattoria. If I could, I'd tell you the name. Anybody remember the name? Waiters wore black vests. One of them didn't hide, he was packing a 38. There's a Mickey D's there now. On to Ci Vediamo. Avenue C below street level. Best of the bunch. tasteful presentation of savory entrees, a la carte, escarole in olive oil and garlic, sauteed. Server turned me on to dessert wines. I love ruby port to this day. Emilio's, Orchidia et al. Ciao. Fear not, ye of pioneering spirit. In the apple, you can always find another jewel. With finger-licking victuals, gourmet and gourmand. Bottomless baskets of crusty warm bread. A sparkling white that catches the light, holds your eye. Off the same list, discover the enticing color of a brand new glass of red. Right. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
An extra applause for Emilio's. It was my favorite.
Which one?
Magic restaurant, yeah.
Uh-huh. All right.
I told you it was holding back.
Wow. You're really good. Did not want to follow your 9/11 piece. That's really a good piece. That's a really good piece.
Ron Combe, yeah.
My piece is small potatoes after that, really small potatoes. It's about a neighborhood that's disappeared, but it did get turned into a movie. I don't even know how to.
Let's see.
I should learn that. All these years, I usually just sort of crouch. I bend over. Oh, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Okay, all right.
Thanks.
Ron Combe.
Yeah, thanks. This piece is called Bad Karma, and it's a Duke and Jill story. Yeah, call it Jack and Jill. It's about the East Village that disappeared. It did get turned into a movie, and Thurston Moore and Kim Gordon are in it while they were still married or whatever. You can find it if you go to New Museum, Bad Karma. You can actually watch the film. Bad Karma. It was hazy, hot, and humid. Gritty summer air banged down on the tar paper roof of the abandoned building on Avenue C where Duke and Jill lived, bringing temperature inside to a slow boil. Duke was crouched in a corner of the room, surrounded by stacks of porno mags, water-damaged books, and heaps of women's clothing. "What you doing, honey?" Jill asked him. "Taking inventory," he growled back. Duke was in a bad mood. The heat was making him sweat heavily, and drops of it were falling onto his best magazines, the ones he managed to keep in mint condition, despite the daily grind of trying to sell them on the street. "Fucking shit," Duke cursed, wiping his face with a lacy pink nightie. "Damn it, Jill. Our stock is running really low. We don't have enough good stuff left to get us more than a six-pack or two and maybe a nickel bag." "I get the message," Jill yelled from the sweltering bathroom. She was trying to moose her grown-out shag into a bouffant. "You want me to go out and cop some merchandise?" "Yeah," Duke said. "What I really need are more zines. These are getting too fucking beat up." Jill rummaged through the piles of dirty clothing for a pair of large-waisted jeans with sharply tapered legs. She also put on a loose black t-shirt and left it untucked. "You know how much I hate doing this," she said to Duke. She chugged down a couple of beers. Then she did a few lines to give her an edge and left the tiny, hot apartment. The streets were steaming. Jill checked out Gem Spot, which is still there, and the other neighborhood newsstands, but they were all onto her with "Get the fuck out of here, you thief," still ringing in her ears. Jill sat down on the curb and popped some pills to help her think. Unfortunately, the only idea she could come up with was to steal some product from another peddler. Jill lurched over to the large black cube sculpture, which isn't there anymore, at the triangular intersection of 4th Avenue and Lafayette Street. I think they're going to put it up down below Cooper Union, I think. but it's gone. I mean, has anyone looked for the black cube lately? It's gone. It's gone.
It's in a different dimension.
It's in a different dimension, that's right. We all believe in chaos theory in the end. Jill lurched over to the large black cube sculpture at the triangular intersection of 4th Avenue and Lafayette Street. A bunch of street peddlers were set up there displaying their wares in the shadow of the cube. One guy was selling bootleg dead tapes, another featured several plastic milk crates filled with badly scratched jazz LPs. Jill felt dizzy. The heat seemed to be magnifying the effects of the pills as she scanned the various items for sale. She leaned on the sculpture for support, and then, swimming into focus, there they were. Row upon row of vintage softcore porn magazines, Swank, Genesis, Penthouse, High Society Hustler. Most of those have disappeared too, right? And yes, a 1953 Playboy, all of them in perfect condition. Just what Duke wanted. Jill got it together and approached the sun-baked, pot-bellied man who sat smiling amid them. He was wearing only a tattered pair of cutoffs, and his bald head gleamed in the sun. "Can you tell me where St. Mark's Place is?" she slurred. The man looked beatifically into her wildly gyrating green eyes. As he turned to point out direction, she scooped up an armful of magazines, slid them under her shirt, and skillfully tucked them into the top of her jeans in one fluid motion. And that's when the heat, the beers, and the drugs hit her full force. She fell face down on the concrete. At that exact moment, Duke showed up. He'd gone out to score some stuff on his own. He sprinted over to Jill, rolled her over onto her back, and put his head against her chest to check for a heartbeat. As he did so, the spine of a porno mag poked him in the eye through her t-shirt. Thinking quickly, Duke hoisted Jill up by the armpits and draped her over his shoulders in such a way as to keep the stolen booty from shaking loose and falling out. "Hey man," Duke said to the peddler, "too much to drink, happens all the time. I'll see that she gets home okay." Duke grinned at the man in fraternal understanding and then staggered off under the dead weight of Jill's limp body. Darkness brought no relief. If anything, the humidity seemed to increase, and a thick, dirty fog settled over the Lower East Side. Duke arranged his display of girly magazines on a flattened piece of cardboard in front of Love Saves the Day, the hip tchotchke shop on the corner of 7th Street and 2nd Avenue. That's probably gone too now, right? Yeah. He carefully positioned his newest treasure, the 1953 Playboy, in the center of it. Jill had scored really big this time. He'd carried her all the way back to their joint, his tank top rank with sweat. After dragging her up 5 flights of stairs, he was finally able to revive her. Duke snapped back to reality. A guy had picked up his centerpiece and was thumbing through the pages. Duke checked him out. It was a large, muscular white guy, dressed all in black. Black pants, black leather jacket, and black motorcycle boots. Guy must be crazy, Duke thought. Still fucking 90 degrees. The guy's greasy 50s-style pompadour contrasted sharply with Duke's stringy, shoulder-length hair. The guy casually rolled up the Playboy, jammed it into his jacket pocket, and turned away, walking north towards St. Mark's Place. "Hey, fucking shit, man, it's my merchandise," Duke yelled. "You gotta pay for it if you want it." Guy didn't stop. "Hey man, watch my stuff, I'll be right back," Duke said to the peddler selling next to him. He jumped up and ran after the guy, who made no attempt to get away. The big guy walked nonchalantly up 2nd Avenue, seemingly oblivious to Duke shouting and cursing. He turned east, crossing the avenue at 9th Street, and Duke followed. He was livid with anger, but he didn't know what to do. The guy was way too big to attack. Duke was a skinny 5'6". Even Jill towered over him. He didn't really want to die over a magazine. He couldn't very well call for the cops. They'd probably buzzed him, too. As they neared the middle of the block, the guy whirled around, his jacket fanning out, and he whipped his hand towards Duke as if he had a weapon in it. Duke jumped back, startled, but the guy merely gave him a weird smile and continued along 9th Street to 1st Avenue. Duke was perplexed and more than a little shaken up, but he stayed right on the guy's tail, just far enough back to run if the guy tried to charge him again. They reached 1st Avenue, crossed it, and turned uptown towards 10th Street. It was at that corner, in front of a neighborhood bodega, where the big guy made his final move. He stopped abruptly, picked up a heavy steel trash basket filled with garbage, and heaved it at Duke. Duke just barely managed to avoid it. At that moment, he noticed a long line of large green trash bags on the sidewalk, and a tiredness filled him as he pictured himself having to dodge each and every one of them. The guy came at Duke shouting, "What do you want from me, faggot? You want to suck my ass? Is that it? Faggot, you want to suck my ass?" Duke looked around in desperation for any kind of weapon and saw what appeared to be a stick protruding from one of the garbage bags. Duke pulled it out and was surprised to find himself holding a 4-foot-long broken fluorescent light tube with a jagged end. Fucking shit, I'm Obi-Wan Kenobi, he thought. "Yo, man, don't hit him with that thing," someone said. "You'll get little slivers of glass in our eyes." Duke looked over and saw a giant black dude with sweatbands on his wrists. And then it hit Duke. This was a drug corner, and that dude was the main man, and he and his new friend were disturbing the evening's commerce. Their fracas might even rouse the cops. And the black dude obviously didn't want that to happen. "Sup, my man," the dealer asked Duke. "Hey, man, I sell in the street just like you, and that guy took something that belongs to me," he answered. "Give it up," the black dude ordered the white guy, which he quickly did, meekly handing the Playboy back to Duke, then splitting. "Now you go back to your spot and be cool with the tube. You don't want to be getting little slivers of glass in your eyes." And he flashed Duke the peace sign. Under a streetlight on 9th Street, Duke looked down at the cover of the Playboy, savoring the sexy pose of the girl who adorned it. She was once again his, but damn, several droplets of water stitched a pattern across her body. Was his sweat ruining yet another magazine? Duke wiped his forehead with the back of his free hand, and it was then that he heard a long, dull rumble of violent summer thunder. Duke looked up just as the heavens opened. Thank you.
Okay, now Jill's coming. Jill, you all set? Okay, ladies and gentlemen, Jill.
Joe Rappaport.
All right. Thanks everybody for coming. I've been trying to figure out what I'm reading tonight, so I guess I'm going to go with this. This is I've written a lot of stuff about, you know, what?
It's all,
Oh, I like the read.
Leave it. Leave it.
no, come on.
Make it immediate.
All right, how's that? Is it still reverby?
It's just her voice.
No, you're okay.
No, I think it was fine.
Try it.
All right, is that okay?
It sounded good out here.
Just talking to the mic.
Okay. All right, so you're gonna wave that hanky or whatever when I'm getting close, right?
You're gonna see this.
I see what?
Can you see this?
Yeah. But just knock or something if I don't, because I'm looking down.
We're fine.
All right. So anyway, just to tell you what this is about. It's a piece about a guy, a period of time when I was doing, not when I, when the protagonist was doing legal proofreading, and being driven by those radio cabs up to work. So if anybody's ever done legal proofreading for a corporate law firm, you may be able to relate to some of it. But anyway, this is a section from it. Oh, and there's a guy named Billy who is the sort of principal character, and he is a very interesting looking young blonde man who has like a really bad case of BO and whatever. So she becomes sort of interested in Billy and whatever. So she's coming into the suite and looking for, you know, just sort of scoping out where he might be. Jessica, who was trustworthy and discreet up to a point, informed me that he was in the black cubicle, which was what everybody called the one in back and all the way to the left. It had black chairs instead of beige ones, and there was a black edging to the tabletop. From the black cubicle, you couldn't see anything that happened in the outer area unless it was happening directly in front of the door. Those who wanted to see their fates coming did not sit in the black cubicle. It was a spot suitable only for the individual who believed in predetermination and destiny, who possessed the curious innocence of the cosmologically vulnerable. That added yet a dimension to Billy's already sinister but alluring package. Maybe he knew something we didn't, and maybe that was why he stayed dirty. Maybe Billy was a seer. When I walked back and contrived to sidle past the black cubicle, he did not even look up. I turned around and passed the doorway again with one section of my attention trained on the eyes that were embedded in the walls. This time I knocked the side of the baseboard. Billy looked up. He stared penetratingly, but did not smile or speak or nod. I stared back. Here was a blonde sailor of the old school, I thought, in a kind of wonder. He even wore a striped navy sweater this time. A pom-pommed hat of dark blue wool was positioned on the corner of his chair. His sanctifiable cheekbones sloped up like altars tilting heavenward or toward the glorification of a reflected sea god. I made the instant decision not to acknowledge him either, in the orthodox way at any rate, and I shot past and back into the main valley of the offices, the Paseo Oscuro. I had ridden up to the building filled with a particular blend of jaded hope and delusional excitement. I carried a small leafy book with me, The Green Pasture, the life's work of a Swedish baronet with authorial intentions named Althorn. And I actually believed, as the limousine rushed up Madison, that I would have time to do more than glance at its rotting pages. As we moved past the dark and the narrows just south of 34th Street, where gasps of the old city of the period dating from 1929 to 1951 could still be heard from time to time on mournful stretches of night, I looked down the side streets that led to Park and Lexington at the gated storefronts and half-lit empty furniture showrooms, the corner food shops with figures moving inside them, filling and emptying them, and at the clothing store windows with regal mannequins whose airy gestures caught and held the streetlight. We continued up, and I noticed too late that the landmarks I had been waiting for were either on parallel avenues or had been torn down. The city that had weathered centuries was falling into a crater of chipped rock and broken artifacts, like the hacked stone laurel wreaths and wings of the lost seraphs of Penn Station, excavated a quarter century later in the Meadowlands and retagged for severer demolition. Soon the buildings got taller and more imposing. They soared like birds, but unlike birds, they darkened and cut off the sky. We passed investment firms, media empires, flagship centers of Deerfield Flyer, Rock Hill, Highfall, and Black Eagle. The great departed department store of B. Altman's limped past at the back of Fifth. Fifth was even more nightmarish. The dead mansions of the industrialists had fallen to such unzoned disrepair that their street-level facades had been dismantled in order to make way for plastic marquees lettered in bargain signs, Charo's Nail Salon, and B. Fine Wholesale Electronics. But one could not cry tears for the destruction. The industrialists had led the vandal charge and were dying on the dull blades of their own swords. At a higher transverse, I recognized the basic Midtown nondescript that had once housed Aileron Medical, where a decade earlier I had somehow convinced them to let me read and correct technical articles. But as the car swept northward, the static of the dispatcher punctuated by fly-catching zaps and lightning breaks at every traffic light, I realized that I was not sure if, in fact, I had ever even worked at Aileron. I could not remember a thing about it except an indistinct blueness out a window that seemed inexplicably to face New Jersey, even though its having done so would have required the raising or at least elliptical rotation of the Carnegie Restaurant and Morgan Spindle and Flatbed office, which stood squarely in its hypothetical line of vision. Once the walls were knocked loose, my spyglass spied Eric, or was it something else? Billy? Bobby? He sat, as I remembered him, in the black walnut, trying to light a wooden ladybug pipe, in which, burning slowly, his pot-laced tobacco kindled and sparked, wiggling and undulating its ash like an earthworm in the rain. He sat alone in the heart of that enveloping chair that anchored the black cubicle, that indwelled the oracle in the absence of human presence. He sat doing the work we all shunned and despised, and he seemed impervious to it, as if the work had not effectively shackled and insulted him as it had the rest of us, because in his vile purity and his self-exile, he had, unlike all of us, occupied a higher human shelf, the level of which could not be attained by the work's evil frequencies. I wondered what it would be like to rise above the work, to see the work yap ineffectually at one's ankles, to stand like a cenotaph, stony and ringed with gray and yellow gardenias, with a bowl of palm milk at one's flank. I guessed I wondered what it would be like to be free and to be serene, as the sailors seemed to be, and unaffected by the salacious and prehensile muck championed by human society and slave legions alike, for slaves like middle managers were sometimes faithful to their captors. But Billy sat in his chair and did not invite me in, and the monster, that's the supervisor, who had phoned to say he would be late and who had promised to make up for the cardinal sin of his brief disloyalty to the firm by pressing triply hard his already stressed staff members, was due in a spine-jangling 5 minutes. Where is Catherine?
She's here.
Okay. How much time have I got?
You're okay.
Okay. Eliza sat in the home and pasture cubicle. Alicia sat in her own NASA-tested impregnable launch pad. Dawn sat primly in the Paul Young Memorial Mini-Suite, and Donna Oleonegro stood at the counter, awaiting instructions as to whom she would be imposing upon that evening. The monster not having arrived yet, the night's work floated hatefully 2 to 3 feet above their heads in a Damoclean rapture of menace. A consumptive coughing had disrupted the peace of the corridor. Old John was having a bad night, said Rod, who had just whizzed in, dropping his car keys on the desk of his cube, the Bucky Mint Geodome, where the shift kept its library of science fiction, current bestsellers, puzzle books, gentlemen's gazettes, and Sports Illustrateds, as well as the manuals for the machines in the suites and the vellum-coated general history of the firm and its allies and general guidelines and rules for employee conduct. Mascarpe Tadeo was aiming pocket arrows at the bullseye mounted at the end of the long foyer. Right in front of him stood the latest public service announcement from Dara and Dom. The Pritherby photos would be displayed as soon as they got them back from Rite Aid and prioritized them in albums. Please be patient, the note said at the end. Clarence played his patented Nylophone and made jokes about the Dara and Dom schedule, and the rest of them snickered whitely. They were all still on their honor, and I watched incredulously as they all trotted out from me their behavior of the borderies. I had tripped uptown in a limousine in which my heavily applied cologne drowned out the last client's motel fuck preferences, and I had rested my palms on the book that sewed together Holderlin and the Gottfrieds, Ben and Keller, and drew Novalis around them in an edging of tragic lace. I had wallowed in pessimistic reveries and stalked in parks, lit harshly and sparingly at night. The ride uptown had emphasized the grandeur and the opulence of my expectations, whetted an appetite, sold me again on the rightness of working for the firm and the monster, and of entering the building and sitting in whichever of the legendary cubicles was vacant and in need that night, despite spitting goblins by the side of the planters and a trapped mouse scurrying around the empty moat. Sit in here, said Jeff, the businessman from Rochester who worked to pay his son's gambling debts and complained all night about his wife. Sit here, said Jacinto, pulling the good chair out from the desk. And then a little more stuff, and then Eliza, Alicia, Dawn, even old John who coughed, all had sanctuaries to sink back into and better times to remember or look forward to, and the red-topped fox required no comment at all. I had come to turn the pages of my book like a duchess on holiday and attempt to make the reacquaintance of the taciturn sailor in his gloves and tam o'shanter, who most manifestly did not need me, so complete was the self-contained vision he possessed that cocooned him away from me and the rest of the predators who subsisted on constant foraging. And now that I dared to examine the counter, it displayed, as so often, its refusal to be interpreted or managed, and its sterile skin rejected my inquiry. With Swiss watch precision, the monster flicked his sweaty baggage into the suite. He was breathing heavily and humming. Thank you.
Okay, so this is a wonderful memorial for me because this is actually upstairs from here. We used to have the meetings for Downtown Newspaper, which published in the 80s and 90s and was one of the major arts furnishers of art and culture and politics for the area, which was founded by James Rensenbrink, and Gary Azon was the art editor. And so that's the past, and in the present I'm thinking, I don't know if anyone noticed, but the Union Square Theater is playing Cinderella, which I know we all want to go to see, and Selma. So you can actually see Cinderella and Selma back to back. The only question is, do you see Cinderella first and then Selma, or do you see Selma first and then Cinderella? This is a very important question, and I have to think about it. While I'm thinking, I'm remembering Tompkins Square Park,